Glad you guys made time to get to church this morning. We are so glad you're here. Actually, met a few of you for the first time today. It's good to have you here. Glad that you're here. If you would, when at the end of the service, we typically pass an offering plate. If you would fill out this form in your bulletin and just drop it in the offering plate, we'd love to have a record of your attendance with us today. We serve a good God, don't we? A God who saves sinners like you and me. The Bible tells us that for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but will have everlasting life. If you're here today and you've never put your faith in Jesus Christ, maybe you came here today and you're just looking for answers to this life, can I tell you, the answers to this life begins by repenting of your sin, turning towards Jesus, and making him the Lord and the Savior of your life. There's nothing better you could do. If you're here today and you know Christ your Savior, we're going to talk about Psalm 55. Doesn't talk a lot about salvation, but I want you to know that we'd love to talk to you about how you can know for sure you're going to heaven. Psalm 55 begins, it's a psalm of lament. And to kind of get us going here is, can you remember a time in your life when you felt hurt and betrayed by someone close to you? Don't raise your hand, don't share the story, don't nudge the person next to you on this one. But those of you who made it through middle school, at least once by middle school, you felt betrayed by a friend. Have you noticed between elementary and middle school, unless your homeschool friend groups kind of stay the same there, but elementary and middle school, there's like a changing of friend groups. Gossip begins just for the girls, never the guys, right? And you probably felt your first betrayal. You get to high school, the betrayal becomes a little bit bigger. It might be a broken relationship, a friend, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. You get to college, and regardless, as you go on in life, you don't have to live very long before you experience betrayal. Before you experience someone who you thought was a friend stabbing you in the back, gossip about you, leaving you, whatever it may be. The reality is we've all been there before. Do you remember that pain? Do you remember that hurt? Do you remember that hopelessness? Psalm 55 is a psalm of lament. It's a psalm that's intended to help us understand, where do we go when the stuff of life happens? Psalm 55, we find David is in the midst of great struggle. I'll give you a little more background as we go, but just to kind of give you the quick history of it. David is living in a time where his kingdom and his kingship is being taken from him by a son, and a trusted advisor, Ahithophel, is, if you will, working behind the scenes to take David out of power. Well, we're going to dive deeper into that here a little bit later, but you have a man who seems as if he's losing everything. He's losing his son, he's losing a friend, he's losing a kingdom. You can almost imagine how that must have felt for him. A lament is a psalm of, if you will, where you bring your pain and your anger to God. And if you've read Mark Brogop's book called Dark Clouds, Deep Mercies, you'll see that laments are usually seen in, if you will, 4 movements. The first movement, and the most important movement, if you will, is that initial turn to God. You're turning to God and coming to him then with your complaint. You'll notice at our church we do not have a suggestion box. You know why we don't have a suggestion box? What do you get in suggestion boxes? You get suggestions that seem a lot like complaints, don't they? The pews, the chairs are too hard, they're too soft. The preacher preaches too long, too short. We like the color of the carpet, we hate the color of the carpet. And there's all kinds of things you might complain about. So we do not have a suggestion box. If you'd like to talk to us, we will take your suggestions. We found face-to-face, you get more suggestions and less what? Complaints. Complaints are almost always best done in secret. Best done when nobody is watching, because you don't have someone who can give a rebuttal. The reality is, the Bible shows us this pattern of you turn to God and you bring before him your complaint. Now, I want to warn you with this one. There are some of you who go like, God is too busy to hear my complaints. No, he's not. Because we have a God who has full capacity to be everywhere present at once. He's got time for you. We also sometimes have this idea, well, my problems are so small, God will not care. We have a God who is all-caring, and he cares to a level we can't understand. And he wants us to bring our complaints. Now, I will give you a caution here. It's one thing to complain, if you will, about the situation. I don't get it. I don't understand. But when that moves into accusation against God and his character, that's when we go out of bounds. But we have a God who has broad shoulders. We have a God who understands our hurts. He understands our condition. Jesus Christ is God in the flesh, and he experienced this life to its full, yet without sin. He understands where you're at. The next movement you'll see is, if you will, a cry for help, a call for God to act. And then where it ends is trust. Trusting in God's character, and I would say this, before he moves. We're going to talk about that a little bit at the end, but I want to remind you, in a lament, the lament doesn't end because we see God move. The lament ends because we rest in a God who will move and act in his time. So if you will, that's the outline we're going to follow this morning. And so turn with me to Psalm 55, and let's look at the first two verses. It says this: to the choir master with string instruments, a maskil of David. Verse 1, give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not your form from my plea for mercy. Attend to me and answer me. I'm restless in my complaint, and I moan. He says, God, listen, I've got problems. Hear me. And I've thought about what things we lament over. I put them in really 4 buckets. One would be physical. Have you been in a place where you're hurting physically? You might be dealing with death. You might be dealing with long-term illness. You might be dealing with cancer. There's all kinds of things that can impact us physically. You know what I found over time is when I'm physically not right, it impacts some of the other areas, doesn't it? We also see that there's not just physical brokenness in this life, but there's also brokenness relationally. Those are the ones that, for me, hurt deeper. It might be a broken friendship. It might be you're struggling in your marriage, struggling in your workplace. Maybe when you come to church, there's an ongoing struggle you have with another church member, and you don't know how to get it resolved. And there's this tension. There's this brokenness. There's also brokenness emotionally. People struggle with depression, with anxiety, with loneliness. And the reality is, I feel like Winnie the Pooh was a really great theologian when it comes to how people are wired different. Some of you are here. I had Eric Scourge in the first service with me. He and I are a little more like Tiggers. How many Tiggers out there? You bouncing your tail all the time? Yes. Every Ernie should be a Tigger, right? Like when life happens, like, let's go, let's get after it. And like generally speaking, kind of Tiggerish. Don't raise your hand at this next one. Some of you are wired a little more like Eeyores, right? Woe is me, life is hard, life is difficult. Can I tell you, you're actually in good company. David seems to be in the Psalms a little more Eeyore-ish. He felt the world at a deeper level than the Tiggers do. When he experienced frustration and depression and anxiety, he felt it heavy. You're going to see as you go through the book of Psalms, he's very clear with his emotion. I want to give you, if you will, a chance to breathe, you Eeyores. I don't believe it's a sin to struggle with depression and anxiety. What is a sin is to allow that depression and anxiety to rule your life, to not turn to God. But David was a man who felt life very deeply. And for you Tiggers out there, you're not more spiritual just because you have a smile even when things are going badly. All right? We have right going on here is he begins to bring his lament. We also see that it's not only relationally, it's not only spiritually, not only emotionally. Sorry, I've said this earlier, but there's also, if you will, a spiritual component. Have you been to a place where your walk with God just seems dry? You may go through the routine of reading the Word, and what you're hoping as you read, it will spark some level of spiritual excitement. That longing for Him that you used to have seems to be gone. And it's like you go to the well that's supposed to bring you spiritual life and fervor, and it's like you bring up the bucket and it feels a little empty. Have you been there? We're spiritually just dry. I would say in any one of those 4 buckets, those are times for us as believers to lament, to turn to God, Share with him, here's what's going on in my heart and in my mind. Here's the story that I'm telling. Here's the emotion I'm struggling with. God, I bring it at your feet. And that's what David does. So if you follow along, beginning now in verse 2, this second half says this, I am restless in my complaint, and I moan because of the noise of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they drop trouble upon me, and in anger they bear a grudge against me. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. I do not like horror movies at all. I get no pleasure from them. The one movie that I remember growing up in 2 notes could strike terror. Do you know what that is? Da-dun, 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 da-dun. You got how it goes, right? And what is coming when you hear those 2 notes? What? Jaws, the shark. Do you know how many times or how long you see in an hour and 24 minutes? Sorry, rather, in 124 minutes. Guess how many minutes we see Jaws for? 4. We don't get our first full view of him until 1 hour and 21 minutes into the film. But the da-dun, da-dun, as soon as you hear the, like, something's coming, you're on the edge of your seat, and some of you are like, who is Jaws? You guys are excused at this point. But have you been there where it just feels like you're on edge? You're hearing, if you will, life's da-dun, da-dun. When's the next shoe going to fall? When's the next problem going to come? And you feel almost like a person stuck at the bottom of a well, and you just see a glimmer of light. And that light keeps getting less and less and less. That's where David is. He talks about the kingdom being taken away from him. He talks about someone who bears a grudge against him. We're going to get to that here in a second. Have you felt that before? Maybe it's something going on in your marriage, in your workplace, in your family, and it has a way of seasoning every part of your life. You get a raise at work, but it doesn't really matter. You don't feel any joy in it because this is going on. You go to church, you sing the songs, you listen to the message, but you leave still feeling really empty. I believe that's where David is at. Have you been there? If you have, this psalm is for you. It goes on, it says this, verse 6, and I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. I would hurry to find a shelter from the raging wind and tempest. What does he say he'd like to do? He'd like to just what? Get away. Just escape. Just give me a week of vacation and then I'll be better. Have you ever been there before? I just need a week of vacation, it'll be all better. That week goes and you come back and it's the same problem and nothing changed. I just need more sleep. Some of you, that is what you need. But you get the sleep that you need and you wake up and you're still exhausted. Some people turn to drugs and alcohol as their escape. Some people turn to the gym. Of the two, choose the gym over drugs and alcohol. Some people turn to relationship. Some of you are like me, and you might find yourself just doom scrolling. You are just literally wasting your life because I just want to escape from whatever else is consuming my mind. That's where David is at. Now, he wasn't doom scrolling. They didn't have that yet. But he goes, if I could just get away. Bring your complaint. What is it that you're struggling with? What is it that's consuming your mind, consuming your attention, consuming your heart? Turn to God. Bring your complaint. God, it doesn't seem fair. I'm working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and the bills seem to exceed my income. I don't get it. God, I'm trying to live my life to please you, yet when I have my daily quiet time, it just feels dry. I don't get it. I've done all these things in my family, yet this is going wrong, that's going wrong. God, I don't get it. I just fill in the blank. Turn to God and bring your complaint. Now, what was the nature of David's complaint? What was he complaining about? Well, he's going to go from complaining to asking God to move. What does he want him to move on? So watch with me what happens. It says this, verse 9. It says, "Destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues." That divide their tongues might remind you of what? The Tower of Babel, when God confused the languages. And so David's saying, I want you to confuse, if you will, what the person is saying. Put that in the back of your head. That's going to help you kind of understand who's he talking about, more than likely. "For I see violence and strife in the city." He's talking about Jerusalem. "Day and night they go around it on its walls, and iniquity and trouble are within it. Ruin is in its midst. Oppression and fraud do not depart from its marketplace." There's trouble in the city. I want their counsel to, if you will, be confused. And then he goes, it's not just some thing that's going on, but the thing is being led by a person, the nature of this person. "For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolent with me, then I could hide from him. But as you, a man, my equal, my companion, my" what? "Familiar friend. We used to take sweet counsel together within God's house, and we walked in the throng." David goes from, I want their counsel to be destroyed, they're overtaking the city, and it's not just some enemy out there, but it's a friend. I believe the friend that's being referred to here is Ahithophel. Ahithophel was one of the wise individuals, one of the people who gave David counsel in his kingdom. Ahithophel in 2 Samuel 15, verse 31, we see that he was part of the coup led by Absalom, David's son, that was trying to overtake the kingdom. And I'd give you some background on that as well. Absalom is one of David's sons. Absalom had a sister that was raped by a half-brother. So Absalom waited on that for a while, and when he has opportunity, he had his half-brother killed. David finds out. David didn't deal, I think it was Amnon that should have been killed for the rape. Doesn't deal with them, so Absalom takes care of it. David doesn't deal with Absalom, but he says, we're going to put you in exile. For about 3 years, Absalom was not allowed to see his father or come into Jerusalem. Well, then David, through some counsel, changes his mind and allows Absalom to come back to Jerusalem, but for 2 years wasn't allowed to come into the king's court, was not allowed to see David. So over a course of about 4 years, Absalom decides, I've got a plan. And his plan was this. When people would come to Jerusalem looking for the king to settle a matter, he'd say, hey, what's your problem? Oh, man, that's a big problem. I understand where you're coming from. If only there was a king who could answer your problems, but David is too busy doing other things. So Absalom tried to endear himself to the people, and he will put distance between the people and David. He does this for 4 years. And then after 4 years, he tells his father, hey, I need to go to Hebron. I need to pay some vows, but the reality is Hebron is a place where kings were crowned. And so Absalom goes off to Hebron. He sends message throughout the country and says, hey, when you hear these words, when you hear this report, come to me because we're going to overthrow David, and I am now the rightful king. So he does this. David is taken off guard, and David, if you will, runs from the city trying to escape Absalom and the armies that are coming against him. Behind this plot was the man Ahithophel. Ahithophel in 2 Samuel 16:23 says this, now in those days the counsel that Ahithophel gave was as if one consulted the word of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel esteemed both by David and by Absalom. So Ahithophel was not just a good friend of David, but he was a trusted counselor, and it says when he spoke, it was as if God was speaking. He gave good and wise counsel. And the counsel he gives in 2 Samuel 17, we're now right in the heart of the insurrection, of the coup against David. Here's what Ahithophel says. Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, let me choose 12,000 men, and I will rise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and discouraged, and throw him into a panic, and all the people who are with him will flee. I will strike down only the king, and I will bring all the people back to you as a bride comes home to her husband. You seek the life of only one man, and all the people will be at peace. And the advice seemed right in the eyes of Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Ahithophel actually gave two pieces of advice. The first advice said to Absalom, I want you to go into your father's concubines, go into them, lie with them, showing that you are now taking your father's place. Not godly counsel, but it was counsel that demonstrated that he was now in control of the kingdom. It was also fulfillment of prophecy. When David sinned with Bathsheba and Uriah, God said, the sword will not leave your family. And he says, what you did with Bathsheba privately, I will do in the open for all the nation to see. Absalom defiles the kingdom. And he listened to Ahithophel. The next piece of advice was that Ahithophel says, I want to gather up 12,000 men while your dad is running and trying to get away. I'm going to go, I'm going to catch him, I'm going to kill David and David only. And all the warriors that are protecting David, they'll actually come back to Jerusalem and they'll serve with you. One life, nobody else has to die, and you'll solidify the kingdom in a matter of hours or days. That was actually the best advice. But David still had friends in the kingdom. One of the friends, I think it was Hushai, came in and said, hey, rather than doing what if I can say his name again, rather than doing what Ahithophel says, I got another plan. Ahithophel's plan, if you don't catch David and he gets away, people will think that you're not very strong. So Absalom, what you should do is just stay in Jerusalem, solidify your kingdom, get everyone to come to you, and then when you have your army all in line, then go chase David down. If he's in the city, that's fine. You'll just take down the city. In fact, you could throw it into the sea for all that matters. You need to make sure you secure the kingdom first. And so what happens is rather than listening to Ahithophel, I did fine in the first service. This service, I can't say it. He listens to Hushai. David gets away. He travels about 85 miles, goes to a fortified city. In the course of 2 weeks to a couple months, David will actually return to power. He should have followed Ahithophel's advice. But here's what happens. 2 Samuel 17, verse 23. When Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey, went off home to his own city. He set his house in order, and he hanged himself. And he died, and was buried in the tomb of his father. There's a question that keeps going through my mind and should through yours. Why would Ahithophel turn on David? You look at some of the verses behind me, 2 Samuel 11:3 and 23:34. What you'll find, it is highly likely that Ahithophel was actually the grandfather of Bathsheba. We know this. Ahithophel had a son whose name was Eliam. Bathsheba was the son of Eliam. Assuming those names are the same person, what you have here is when David sinned against the kingdom, against Uriah, and against Bathsheba, Ahithophel, like any grandfather would do, took it personal. I've been having an ongoing discussion with one of the individuals in our church. The sin of David with Bathsheba, usually we use the term what? Adultery, right? It was for sure adultery. But as you pull on some of the breadcrumbs, I think it may have been more egregious than that. It may have been rightly called rape. By position, by power, did she have a choice? And there's some Hebrew words that could have been used that would make it for sure that's what happened. So there's some speculations. There's just these little breadcrumbs. And then I added this one to it this last week. If this is true, if Ahithophel is the grandfather of Bathsheba, and Ahithophel rightly understood what happened to be as rape, what do you think any man, any grandfather would be thinking as it comes to the well-being and the honor of his granddaughter? All they would see is red. I think that's what happened. I think at that moment, Ahithophel began plotting, how do I take out King David? And for 4 years, he played the long game. If you read through 2 Samuel, there's several people playing the long game. Absalom did it with his half-brother. David actually does it at the end of his life. Before he dies, he says, Solomon, take care of these people for me, rather than him doing what he was supposed to do. And what you see happens, Ahithophel begins allowing bitterness to build and build and build till he finally gets his chance and he tries to take David out. I don't have any teaching points from that because things get a little confusing now, right? So who's the good guy and the bad guy in this psalm? It's David's the good guy, right? Have you noticed that God's word is always a little muddy when it comes to its main characters? Abraham was a man of faith, except for those couple times. David was a man after God's own heart, except for Uriah and Bathsheba. The word of God is beautifully muddy, just like our lives, isn't it? Can I say this? What Ahithophel did that was absolutely wrong, he took matters into his own hands. He allowed bitterness and vigilante justice to take control. What should have happened is what happened should have been brought into the open courts. And then God made a decision. And sometimes God frees people that we would not free. If God sets a person free, what do you think we should do? I'll let you answer that in your own time. So we're back to David, his psalm of lament. Ahithophel's been coming after him. Absalom is coming after him. He's running for his life. And he asks God to work. He says, verse 15, let death steal over them. Let them go down to Sheol alive. This would be what you call an imprecatory psalm. He is saying, God, kill them and take them down to the grave alive. For evil is in their dwelling place and in their heart, but I call to God. Verse 17, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon I utter my complaint and moan. You remember that phrasing from back early on in the psalm. And he hears my voice. He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage. For many are arrayed against me. He turned from bringing God act to now, I believe, God, you can act. I trust you. You will save me. You hear my voice. You redeem my soul. God will give ear and humble them. He who is enthroned from of old, Selah, because they do not change and they do not fear God. He says, God, you hear me. God, you're going to humble them. My companion stretched out his hand against his friends. He violated his covenant. His speech was smooth as butter, yet war was in his heart. That sounds like Ahithophel. For 4 years, yes, King David, this is a great idea. Yes, King David, here's good counsel. Yes, King David, until what? He turns on him. His words were softer than oil, yet there were drawn swords. And then verse 22. And I believe this psalm is written as David is running from Ahithophel and from Absalom. And the reason for this, he cries for God to confuse Ahithophel's counsel, which God does, but David doesn't know it yet. He asks for Ahithophel to be brought down to Sheol. Ahithophel kills himself. He does, but David doesn't know this yet. I believe this psalm is a psalm that is fresh, like right in the middle of the lament. Right at the place where it's coming to its climax. Have you ever been there? Like when you get hurt, the pain is really intense at first, and over time, sometimes it will deaden. David's in the intensity of the event happening right here. His choose to trust begins. Cast your burden on the Lord. Why? He will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. I had to look up what that word moved meant. And the context I got from the Hebrew was this. It'd be like if you build a house on a foundation. If the foundation goes away, what happens to the house? It collapses. If someone sprains an ankle to the point where it breaks and they can no longer move, he will not allow someone to have their foundation completely broken, to have their legs snapped so they can no longer move. It's kind of like what he says in 1 Peter. Casting all your cares upon him. Why? For he, I like what King James says, for he careth for you. It reminds me of Matthew 7. Jesus preaches the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And then he turns to the crowd and he says, there's two kinds of builders. There's the wise builder and the foolish builder. Blessed the man who hears my word and does it. I will liken him to what? A wise builder. The storms come, the floods came, and they beat on the house. But the house stood because it was built upon what? The rock. The Christian life, the believer's life, is not marked by an absence of struggles and trials and storms. It's marked by a sure foundation of God himself, who will not allow the house, your life, to collapse. Cast your burden on the Lord. He will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. But you, O God, will cast them down to the pit of destruction. Men of blood and treachery shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you. You may have come here today, and you are right in the thick of the lament. Even as I preach this, the reality is Chris and Sandy Opitz come to my mind. I love Chris and Sandy. I know you do as well. They're going through a hard season right now. In hospice, as Sandy is dealing with pain as the cancer has spread. Chris seeking to minister to his wife, who he loves. As a church family, we feel that with them. You just wish you'd go and take all the pain away, right? But you can't. But who can? We have a God in heaven who can help them through that pain. Some of you this last year have experienced deep loss. Could be a spouse, could be a father, could be a loved one. You know that pain, and there's no fixing it in the sense of you can't bring them back. Can I encourage you? Trust God and his character. He is good. He is loving. He is kind. He is sovereign. In his providence, there's nothing that takes him by surprise. And more than that, there's nothing that he is not ultimately directing. You can trust him. And the trust doesn't begin when you read the last chapter of your life story and understand how it all worked out. David was probably still on the run where he says, but I will trust in you. You're in the middle of the storm in your family, in your marriage, in your workplace, in your life, wherever it is. You begin trusting God not when the storm goes away, but when you remember that the person that is with you in the storm. I will trust you. Turn to him. Bring your complaint. He's got broad shoulders. Cry for him to act. And when you've done that, trust. The big idea this morning is simple. When the pain and the hurt runs deep, cast yourself in to the arms of Jesus. I remember when my kids were younger, I would not do this now. It would go badly for everyone. But they're 2, 3, 4, and I'd be in the pool. Hey, jump to Dad. What would they do? They'd jump to me. At that point, at that size, I could catch all of them. With my brokenness, and they've now grown, probably doesn't go quite as well. I remember doing this when we were in the pool. You may have 3, 4, or 5 foot stage, something of that nature. Like, hey, come on, jump to Dad. Dad would be when the wife would go like, not so much. But if I got them quick enough, they'd still jump. And what would I do? Most of the time, I would catch them. Whatever the struggle or the trial of life is, jump into the awaiting arms of Jesus, because he will catch you every time, and he is good. Father God, I thank you that you're a God that doesn't call us to suck up our emotions, our struggles, and our fears, and to just, if you will, deal with them. You do call us to bring those struggles, those fears to you, so that you can deal with them. And Lord, I pray that for every one of us, including myself, that have come here and there's a brokenness and there's a heaviness, I pray, God, that we would bring our complaint. We'd cry for you to act. And before we see your hand in action, that we would begin to choose to trust you. You have never let your children perish, to be separated from you. You are always there sustaining us. So we thank you for that truth that is there in the storms,